What are the darkest things happening in the world right now? Story 1. On a different note, long-term acute care facilities. These are places where huge numbers of people who are effectively brain dead are kept alive with a track, a breathing tube through a hole in the throat, and a feeding tube through the abdomen. They sit in these human storage units and slowly decay because their families refuse to accept that they're already gone. What's especially disturbing is that the same families demanding they be kept alive often never visit or see the reality of what that existence looks like. Someone sustained like a body plugged into the matrix. I call these places purgatory because the people there aren't truly dead, but they are absolutely not alive either. Story 2. The Mexican drug wars have grown increasingly brutal and sadistic over the past 20 or so years, especially as the old generation of drug lords were captured or killed. Their removal created a power vacuum filled by newer cartels like Los Zetas and CJNG, sparking constant turf wars with older groups like Sinaloa and the Gulf Cartel. What's changed most is the method. Earlier figures like Pablo Escobar or Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo primarily relied on targeted assassinations. Modern cartels use terror as strategy. Mass torture, public executions, kidnappings, civilian massacres, all meant to intimidate rivals and the general population into submission. The goal remains control of routes, logistics, and the enormously profitable drug trade that generates billions every year. Story 3. The looming phosphorus shortage is something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Phosphorus is a fundamental building block of life. We literally cannot survive without it. It's a key component of fertilizer, and industrial agriculture is burning through it rapidly even though it's a finite resource. Farmers also tend to over-apply it, accelerating losses far beyond what's necessary. People compare it to oil, but the difference is terrifying. There is no substitute. If current trends continue, we could exhaust usable supplies within a few hundred years. Some sources even suggest within our lifetime. Recycling it from waste might be possible, but there's almost no serious public discussion or action. I'm not an expert, just someone who's read articles and watched documentaries, but I don't understand how this isn't a global emergency topic. Story 4. Elderly people with no one to care for them being forgotten and left to deteriorate. Society does far too little for them, considering they're the reason we even get a chance at life. What's especially scary is the next wave of retirees. People reaching old age with car loans, mortgages, rent, and massive debt, often bringing in less through Social Security than their monthly expenses. We ran the numbers for my dad, who retires next year. After a lifetime of full-time labor and overtime, factoring in his debts and Social Security income, he'll be left with about $400 a month. That's it. Story 5. In North Dakota, a private company, not the state, is attempting to use eminent domain to seize farmland from about 80 landowners. Summit Carbon Solutions wants to build a carbon capture pipeline to transport liquefied carbon from ethanol plants in Iowa and store it underground in North Dakota. The project creates no real economic benefit beyond allowing ethanol plants to claim lower emissions. The governor isn't defending landowners because the ethanol industry wields enormous political influence. Surveyors escorted by armed guards are entering private land without permission, driving through planted fields, damaging crops, and even entering barns, all before legal approval or court rulings. The lawsuits haven't even begun, yet the work already has. Story 6. All the chemicals and microplastics we ingest, inhale, and absorb constantly. And then we act surprised when people develop chronic illnesses, allergies, or hormonal disorders. I remember learning in history class that Queen Victoria used cosmetics made with lead, applying huge amounts because she was insecure about her appearance. I remember thinking, how could they not know how dangerous that was? I suspect future generations will look back on us the same way, horrified that we willingly surrounded ourselves with plastics and chemicals that slowly poison us. Story 7. The thing that disturbs me most is the mindset in my country, Russia. I live in a small town and we already have an alley of heroes of the special operation. There are 2 children stationed there daily with donation boxes, asking passers-by to give money to special operation veterans. The use of the word veteran alone is obscene. Most people here fully support this. And that's just one example. Others include police sexually assaulting opposition members with champagne bottles. The public largely accepts it. Story 8. The knee-jerk, catastrophically misguided response to the so-called opioid epidemic has left tens of thousands of disabled Americans trapped in unbearable pain with no effective treatment. Most people will never experience pain so severe and unrelenting that it resists all treatment except narcotics. Pain intense enough to trigger heart failure or stroke. Yet these patients are expected to endure it indefinitely because strangers abused medication. Suicide rates among people with incurable pain have risen sharply as access to treatment vanished. People would euthanize a pet instantly if it suffered even half that level of pain. Somehow that compassion disappears when the sufferer is a coworker or family member. Story 9. Billionaire elites are pouring obscene amounts of money into AI and robotics development to eliminate the working class entirely, replacing labor so they never have to pay anyone again and can live like untouchable gods. Fully AI-run restaurants already exist, yet prices haven't dropped despite the absence of wages. Meanwhile, a large portion of the population, especially in the US, aggressively opposes any form of social support, even as automation steadily erases jobs. This has been happening since the 1970s, with collective shock every time another wave of workers, including themselves, is laid off. Story 10. Two asset management firms, BlackRock and Vanguard, control roughly $16.7 trillion in assets combined. As of 2021, only about $40 trillion exists globally. That means two companies manage close to half the world's circulating wealth. Dig deeper, and it gets stranger. BlackRock is publicly traded, while Vanguard is privately held, and Vanguard is BlackRock's largest shareholder. Effectively, one private company has managerial influence over nearly half of global capital. People love ranting about shadowy cabals, but the reality is far more mundane. It's corporate consolidation under the leadership of a deeply conventional Episcopalian Republican executive who died around 2019 to 2020. Most brands you encounter daily fall under their influence. Story 11. We were blocked from a lot of information. The Iranian Revolution continued. Some men joined those women and started to stand together. I watched a few videos for about 3 months, and then the videos started disappearing. I came across a few more by people saying that the videos would probably be deleted, so people would share as fast as they could, and then puff. The videos were people in horror, hiding while soldiers or police were out shooting. Story 12. Methamphetamine use in family circles. My father, my aunt, my other aunt, my uncle, my aunt's spouse, my grandfather, my grandmother, my other grandfather, my great-uncles. 2, and then if I go far enough, I'll find more sad souls. It's horrific, nightmarish, and I'm lucky I'm just hearing about it. I'm away from these family members. Some have gotten help, but it's something so sad that is just so frightening. The drug war was a failure. We failed these people who were once people I looked up to, but they're gone, completely. Artistic and creative people were listed, but that was before their families cursed them. These people get a cell for this too, not actual help. Story 13. A small group of rich people owning a major of the world's resources and money. These people have been siphoning the rest of the world for recorded history. It's so late at this point that the general 90% population is working with like 5 to 10% of the wealth. Really think about that. The 1% control and usually do not spend 90% of the wealth, if not more. They aren't creating jobs or any other bullcrap. They're running bullcrap charities so they can pretend they're not the reason people need charity in the first place. Story 14. Egypt claims the privilege of refusing infrastructure projects on the Nile upstream of Egyptian ground. This is a legacy right originally established when Egypt was effectively a piece of the British Empire. The modern Egyptian government maintains the position that they are legally entitled to forbid or destroy any structure upstream that could interfere with their freshwater requirements. Meanwhile, Ethiopia just dammed the Nile River. This project could do wonders on a regional level. A huge reservoir would mitigate the effects of droughts, and a major hydropower facility would bring power to communities that could not otherwise afford it. That reservoir is presently filling slowly out of respect for Egyptian water needs. Yet these are not the most stable regimes in our verkakte world. What happens if either government succumbs to a takeover by an unstable warlord? What happens if basically peaceful regimes face an extreme drought crisis where that reservoir is critically depleted and the dam's existence is seen as a threat to Egypt's prosperity and/or public health? This is a hot spot no one is ready to cool down, though it could get even worse if great powers saw it as another venue for proxy warfare. Story 15. My family never allows girls to step outside the few square meter homes. When a girl reaches 10 years old, their parents ban them from going outside, and a few years later they will arrange their marriage and will get pregnant. In the first year of marriage, and most of the time the girl will be only 14 or 15 years old, and these things will start happening to her. I don't know how to describe it, but my family and my tribe practice these things, and I think it is dark and evil, and very few people may know about it. Story 16, I'll give you a short of it. We are frogs in warm water, if you get it. We talk a lot about how capitalism is screwing us and democracy is going to save us. Forget everything you know. The top are working to make us a renters class. You will own nothing and be happy, says the WEF. They are breaking us to a point that many more of us than before will be put into a situation where we are relying more than ever on them taking care of us. We go right along with it too, believing that the Dems are saving us and the conservatives are screwing us. Follow the rabbit hole and it's two sides of the same coin. We are being made into a poor working class that is dependent on the government for basic day-to-day comforts. They don't care if you are a Christian or a veteran or mentally ill. They only care that you work just enough to keep the machine going for them. Nothing less, nothing more. People who are incapable of working are cheap enough to throw a bone to until they die. We will always have that kind of labor shrinkage in society. Another virus to wipe out the weak can always help with their bottom line. Story 17. Humanity spent 30 years all contributing to a massive pool of data online. Centralized services like Reddit that believe they own that data are making moves now to stop a fair commodification of our data during the transition to a culture that is relying so heavily on AI that many jobs are lost. That is why Reddit is making these API changes. All our contributions. They could find a way to do a profit share, but instead they are going public. Schwartz would be rolling in his grave. It is going to be a dark future if data isn't fairly commodified. And right now, it's only corporations making the money. Not the people who actually created the data. Story 18, the impending famine that started last year. A year ago, the storage for Ukraine's grain exports was pretty much stopped. What was at port and in storage was it? Most of the farmland is being used for war now. Egypt gets 80% of its flour imported from Ukraine and Russia. This source is 50% gone. While the EU has followed WEF guidelines and is decreasing crop generation because fertilizer usage isn't green and hurts the climate. So there will be fewer exports. The US has also decreased its fertilizer usage and thus will have few crops too. Pretty much the entire West is pulling back on food production by choice. Ukraine supplies nearly 2/3 of the world's sunflower meal. The top markets in 21 were China, 48%, the European Union, 25%, and Turkey, 7%. China was scheduled to get some 7 million tons of grain from Ukraine in 2023. That isn't happening. Spain gets a ton of grain from Ukraine, well they used to. With fewer sellers and more buyers globally, the biggest users are going to collapse first. And that will start in Egypt and spread to Africa. It'll also include China, because they're going to fall short of being able to buy everything up and they have so many mouths to feed. Whereas Spain will be helped by the EU so they will be better, but not unscathed. The famine in Africa and Asia for sure. Story 19. People are starving, and we are focused on a couple billionaires in a tin can. Food insecurity is such an easily solvable issue that any true government with any power should be able to address. Instead, they allow hardworking and honest people to starve and struggle. You can't have a government without people. Yet the common play by most governments is to bleed the people slowly. It's an artificial problem that has very real implications as to what the nations of the world stand for. To protect and ensure the prosperity of their people, or to simply maintain control. Story 20. The conditions of the meat or dairy industries are absolutely horrid. Oh, also the wool, fur, leather industries are very hard to watch. About 83 billion animals are slaughtered yearly, and these animals are held in tight spaces, are either overfed or underfed, and are full of pests and disease. The natural lifespan of these animals are lowered drastically, and especially male animals don't even get to live a full day a lot of the time. Cows are being artificially inseminated. They also don't get to be with their calves when they're born, which is very traumatic for both the calf and the mother. The slaughter process in some, if not a lot of, slaughterhouses is absolutely inhumane and disgusting. Meat or dairy industries also emit about 15% of greenhouse gases. They contribute a lot to deforestation for agriculture and water scarcity. Yet people don't bat an eye because they're so used to eating meat and it's never been more accessible. Story 21. American politics. The sheer idiocy, the complete lack of empathy and common sense, and the total want to run and control people's lives and choices in the supposed land of the free is embarrassing. The racist push against minorities, the what to not only silence but eradicate the open and public existence of gays and others in the orientation spectrum. How we hear far more about what politicians want to remove from schools and education to hide the past and ease their guilt rather than doing what's positive for every single American, not just the ones that bow to one side or the other. And how we have gone so far backwards in regards to decency and what's considered respectful decorum and conversation, while at the same time pretending things are censored and canceled. When anyone with eyes in 5 minutes to research can notice that the internet made everything a free-for-all with no limits in comparison to how it was decades prior. Story 22. IT engineer of over 15 years and currently still in the industry at a high level. There are no safeguards whatsoever in place to keep foreign governments from hacking our hospitals and shutting everything down. Or our power grids, our water supply. The US has a doomsday bug that can essentially cripple any nation's entire critical infrastructure, but so does Israel, so does Iran, so does Russia, and China. We've been at a critical, terrifying standoff for 5+ years and nobody even knows it. If you buy a USB stick from Shein and then use it in your air-gapped government water filtration system, Chinese counterintelligence has access to it. If you plug a cheap Amazon lamp into your air-gapped company-issued nuclear maintenance laptop, anarchists both foreign and domestic can cause a meltdown. The US did it to Iran to stall their nuclear program. We subtly created issues until their nuclear facility began failing over and over. We used this bug knowingly against them and they consider this an act of war, one we haven't yet paid the price for, but Iran is determined to collect on. These aren't speculative, these are facts. 1 hour back. Story 23. Cameroon is currently under a civil war that never seems to get covered by international media. Basically, modern Cameroon was founded when a former British and French colony merged together to form one country. The country is mainly dominated by French speakers, as the former French territory was bigger than the former British territory, and thus most of the English speakers live in southern Cameroon. Cameroon has been under dictatorship since the 1960s that's dominated by the French-speaking population. Obviously, the two populations don't get along, and they've had a long history of conflict. This has made the English speakers want to separate from Cameroon altogether and form their own country, similar to what South Sudan did, and that's how the Civil War started. Story 24. What's happening to my wife and I's entire life and future as I typed? Been together for 25 years. Now I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow if we end up homeless. All because we dared to complain about rats destroying the house walls, the HVAC ducts, etc., causing my power bill to exceed $2,000 that the property management company refuses to pay for, and then decided to evict in retaliation for me suing them after being ignored entirely since August 2022. Dude, we are so screwed it's not even funny. Got desperate enough to actually start a GoFundMe and haven't got a single donation, despite sharing it in Facebook, Nextdoor, even finally made a Twitter. Nothing though. This is just crazy. Story 25. More people are becoming too vain these days. Very narcissistic. In an effort to gain public approval, people are willing to humiliate themselves or even lie, pretending they believe what some groups of people believe in order to gain their approval. Everybody wants to be the next big superstar, but they're not willing to put any actual work into becoming one. It's all about looks and being risque, but rarely do you see any of these new influencers show any real talent or skill of artistic or practical value. Of course, their followers will follow their examples, which continues the trend of basing your worth simply on looks alone. For example, if an influencer begins promoting fat acceptance or body positivity, their followers might be influenced to stop exercising or stop eating healthy. Ironically, these influencers can be seen obsessing about being macho while they preach that being fat is healthy, even if medically that's false. Grade 26. North Korea is starving itself to death. They never produced enough food to be self-sufficient and always relied heavily on imported food. And ever since they closed their borders completely in response to COVID, the tiny bit of information we've been able to get out of that black hole is that everyone is starving. Not just average citizens, but party members too. Outside of Kim's inner circle, nobody has enough food or medicine to survive. Since the government is expecting civil unrest in response to the famine, they've been cracking down even more than usual. People get executed just for bringing in outside influences like a recording of a Chinese soap opera or something. Everything that was already batcrap crazy about North Korea has been turned up to 11 during their lockdown. Story 27. I predict wars in North America, the continent, as population increases and resources dwindle, especially amongst the uneducated. Bans on abortion makes me think the wealthy elite want a working class like slaves even worse than now. And because of politics, we're not actually getting a fair democracy to utilize all of the potential for this continent. Water, farmland, teaching real skill sets in schools, etc. We look weak. It is scary to think that if you own anything, you really don't, unless it is paid off and you'll have the means, as in property tax, to maintain a lifetime. You know who has those means, correct? What is a sheer travesty are idiots online. A fool and his money are soon parted, who donate randomly to other countries or online figures instead of real charities. Story 28. North Korea is literally the craziest thing ever. People are completely cut off from the rest of the world, starving and being fed constant propaganda and lies to make them believe they are being cared for by a god and everyone else wants to kill them. No one truly has any real idea of how many people are in the forced labor camps there or how many die of starvation daily. Meanwhile, the dictator has been funneling all of their resources into developing nuclear weapons so that they can make themselves a threat and continue to provoke many countries able to completely wipe them off the planet with the touch of a button. Story 29. I'd say just about the darkest thing that you can think of, with legitimate feelings of grief, is the global mass extinction event that is maybe 30 years away from our current trajectory due to climate change. Roughly 54% of the world's current living plant and animal life is expected to be extinct by 2050, increasing to around 70% by 2080. Greenland will literally be vaporized off of the face of the earth because it is melting at a rate that is now unstoppable by any means of human intervention. This is the single most important thing happening in the world right now. This could mean a worldwide conflict over basic resources such as food, clean water, and access to unpolluted air to breathe. Islands in the Pacific are being completely submerged in rising sea level. People have been forced out of lands they have ancestrally occupied for thousands of years. The impending refugee crisis will bring a new age of global resource suffocation, the likes of which we are neither prepared for or could possibly accommodate. The end times are literally around the corner, and we still have many people refusing to accept the glaring reality of the situation. If you are still skeptical after taking time to read all of the resources I've linked, mark my words, it will come whether or not you believe. You cannot escape the unraveling of the fabric of civilization. If you think it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect you, it already has. Story 30. Haiti. After the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse on the 7th of July 2021, Port-au-Prince devolved into, more than usual, social and political chaos. Gangs, politicians, military, and police are all commingled, and all lines of social trust are gone. For self-protection, and sprinkle in some revenge, civilians are going full vigilante. Groups of civilians have been banding together to round up and kill suspected gang members. In addition to the usual beatings and machete hackings, they have been chaining and burning the suspects alive. The perps are having car tires hung around their bodies and/or necks and set on fire. Story 31. I don't know how relevant it is, but something dark that's always stuck with me is when you see famous and rich people showing off their large amounts of jewelry and diamonds. Like you see a rapper with multiple diamond-encrusted chains, rings, and watches, and you see big jewelry makers showing the expensive diamonds and such things that they bought at auction to be turned into earrings for rich people. But the sad thing about it is that the gems and diamonds were most likely, if not most definitely, mined by young kids in places like Africa and war-torn countries. For example, when people in the Western world, such as a famous rapper or celebrity, shows up to a big event boasting a 100,000 diamond watch, nobody thinks about how some child was probably forced to dig and mine for it as a child laborer. Maybe I just sound jealous of people with lots of jewelry, but that's my opinion on that. Sorry it was long. Story 32. The number of elderly folks in nursing homes being forced to do therapy because they have insurance that pays the nursing home bills. By the thousands across the US. There's big money in this. Many are not appropriate for therapy or should be in hospice. Medicare getting ripped off in a massive way. Medicare continually tries to implement rules to stop this from happening, but therapy companies and nursing homes keep easily finding the workarounds. And that leads to the disturbing fact that thousands of therapists are providing this unnecessary and unethical treatment because they need to keep their job. Story 33. So something that's less human rights violation and more pressing environmental crisis that average people and companies can contribute to is the global water crisis. In 30 to 40 years, major first world cities like Mexico City, London, Louisiana, Tokyo, and famously Cape Town, among others, will just run out of drinking water. Like where we literally won't have water rations to spread to enough citizens and people will just die in the streets and there will certainly be some level of anarchy. The reason is because we've dried our lakes and rivers dry, and due to things like inefficient agriculture and livestock irrigation, we have to draw out underground aquifers that have an extremely limited supply and take thousands of years to refill. Story 34. The so-called use of electric bikes and cars and public transportation that runs on electricity that they say is good for the environment is in turn harming developing and third world countries, where specific components needed for batteries for those stuff are made there and pollute the land and water and displaced people. And these developed countries love to preach about how developing and third world countries need to step up on climate change when these countries are still suffering from the setback and effects thanks to the colonizers who ravaged their countries and stumped their growth. These countries don't have the money to simply put in for some major change in policies for climate change like the West does. Of course, there is corruption and other issues, but so much has been lost due to colonization. Minerals, money, and even culture and heritage. Story 35. The U.S. shadow government is being fully documented and proven to Congress in its full capacity over the last month, and nobody seems to care. The media has gone blackout. These programs fully murder citizens at will as needed. It's not just a wild idea anymore. The paperwork for it all is being handed in for investigation with demands for declassification. What they are hiding and why they are hiding it is worlds beyond anything else happening right now on this planet. But also the funnel of money from us taxpayers to programs that are militant against them should be the only story in the news, and it's just too big and dangerous to cover. This should have world governments in upheaval, but I think that is exactly why they are not.